the elections won't. The elections are coming up, obviously. It's a khale.
29th of May,
Yeah,
2024.
yeah. And then we're discussing what the youth of South Africa today compared to the youth of South Africa back in 1994. Definitely, participation when it comes to the elections did drop really like drastically. So we're trying to figure out what's the cause for that? Like, why is that even happening? Yeah. So, like, what's the reason for that? Or a participation in youth, if to a point where like people are not interested anymore in voting compared to 1994. Like, no one the line I don't know if you've seen the images,
Yeah.
but no line I want to if it's like going for kilometers. No. So, but right now, if you check the lines, mostly about the youth is there, but participation is dropped really drastically. So we're trying to figure out what's the reason for all of that, and according to what could the reason be, or all the song.
Well, first things first, the fact that 1994, obviously the reasons for voting were different, and we have but when you were voter at the time, now the youth of that time now are people that are grown up, so the circumstances were different for them. And how they grew up, it was very, very different for them, and they had a reason for voting. They had hope. They had dreams. There was hope. Yeah, democracy, or what is this new dawn bringing? So now it's 30 years later, it's different, because bona ba tlo bona o kare- so people have they've had a different reason to vote back then than now.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
30 years later, things are more different.
Yeah.
The dream is on shaky ground.
Yeah.
So I think dilo tse the government had intended on making happen, most of them have happened. But for us now, there's a different fight.
Yeah, you're
The youth
definitely.
of today, there's a different fight. Some of us were even born during that particular election year.
Yeah.
So now that we are the new youth, we are the new grown-ups, now we're experiencing things differently than back then. We have new struggles,
Yeah.
which we will also talk about during the episode.
Yeah.
So I think a lot has changed, definitely. But the reasons for voting are different now. Our youth is facing more challenges, and it does not look very hopeful.
All right, because Okacheka, like as you said, the circumstances back then, what it meant for the youth going into the polls or vote, it was more a matter of like apartheid. So like what we had to come out of apartheid, and then we wanted freedom, and we also had this belief or this new government will bring serious change into our lives, like we won't be oppressed anymore, and there were many expectations, and yeah, so I think definitely youth here back then compared to youth here now, two different people, and
Two different struggles.
yeah, two different struggles. But then since we've achieved that, we did get freedom. We're free from apartheid. So you'd think or we would carry on, voting ka that thing or okay, we want more change, we want I mean, like, I think the better way or re kgone fihlella dilo, the better way or a country re kgone fihlella new heights is through the polls, don't you think?
Yeah, that's true.
And if a certain government party is not fulfilling certain obligations or expectations, it's only natural. It's only natural or vote for a different party that will bring about that change. So the question is, why isn't that happening? Like, why aren't we enthusiastic about voting?
Because who's going to bring the change? If you look at the parties that are currently in the running, who's going to bring that change? Who's got more potential to bring that change that we seek? And it's scary because are they just making the promises, we are going to change this, we are going to change that, and then once we put them in government, what's going to happen? Once they start once they lead a country, what's going to happen? Is there going to be change? Are the problems that we have currently as the youth going to be solved? There's the issue. I think one of the biggest issues is unemployment. Youth unemployment is huge. There's so many young people that are currently unemployed in the whole country, and it's sad because there are a lot of graduates as well in that number. So it's not just about people are not educated, but people are getting educated. People are graduating, but where are the jobs? And we're encouraged, we need to open our own businesses to create employment, but how many of us are capable of doing that? How many of us have those skills that are required to have our own businesses? For how many of us is it practical to start a business?
And then besides, in order to start a business, you need significant capital. Like you have to have financial. You need finances to start a business. I mean, it is possible to start.
And it's like, who can bring that change? It's not like we are not noticing, we're not looking as the youth. We are living in this country and we know the issues that are there, and we know the leaders that are currently in power. But we're also looking at the other leaders that are trying to get in power, and we're trying to see who's the better alternative for us. And I'm not going to lie, it does not look very good. It does not look like there's a better alternative to that.
So are you somebody that follows politics?
Not really. I don't really follow politics. I mean, obviously now because elections are trending and all that. So every once in a while, I watch the news and I sort of like to keep up to date with what's happening. And sometimes politics are not even things that you can avoid because it's just there. It's a constant thing that's happening. Even when you're on social media, you do come across news that are happening in politics. So it's not something that you completely can avoid. But like I said, it's very difficult for youth to sort of like,
I think,
engage with that. Because it feels like whose message is bringing that sort of hope that we are hoping for, and who can we trust to say once we put this person in power, they'll be able to deliver.
So it's more a situation of trust. Like it seems like we've lost trust in our leaders. And even if somebody new comes along and they preach the same gospel, we've kind of just lost hope and we've lost interest in the whole affair. We just feel like, they're just gonna promise us a whole lot of good things, but they won't deliver at the end of the day. And instead of delivering, they'll just take and keep on taking. I think that's the kind of energy or feeling that most of the youth has at this point in time.
That's true. I think also, there's also that energy, or it's in two different parts. I think there's also an energy, or those who are voting for the current government to stay in power because they have benefited from what that government has brought. Benefited from the policies. And they're scared that should they vote for another party, those benefits, those policies will no longer be in place because a new party will bring with it new policies. That's what some of the messages we are getting from the youth when you talk to other people. But I'll give you an example with the grants. If I vote for a different party, am I still going to be able to get my monthly grant? So it's also that fear, am I going to lose the current income, whatever I'm getting from the government as well? And I think it's not just with the youth in terms of that, it's from people that are beneficiaries of the grant. And that's not wrong at all. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody wants to lose nobody wants to lose their bread.
I think you're definitely right, because here in South Africa we have many grants. For example, if you have a baby, the government will take care. They'll give you, I think, how much is it? $500, something like that.
I think so.
From the time the baby's born up until they're 18 years old, that's 500 rands a month. Okay, and there's also the grant for the elderly from age 60. They'll give you a monthly income, and also disability. If you have certain disabilities, you also get a monthly income. What else is there? I think those are the three main ones.
The one that was it introduced during the COVID?
Oh yeah. The 350 rands for the unemployed.
Yeah, so I think that's what's getting most of the people who are going to vote. They're trying to vote to keep that policy in place. So it's keep the old guard in so that we don't.
So back to this 350 rand grant. It was initially introduced because of the COVID situation. But it's still continuing. So it seems like it's going to be like an ongoing thing. As long as you're unemployed, you have access to that. So if you compare like the current system in South Africa right now to the rest of Africa, to most African countries, I think South Africa is the one country that is definitely leading in terms of monthly grants.
That's, I think, the sentiment. South Africa is probably one of the only African countries. I'll take that route instead of saying the only.
It's not. So, I wouldn't say it's the only. But it's definitely
probably
one of the few ones.
I don't know if we can get. It would be interesting to find out about that.
It's definitely one of the few countries in Africa that are offering grants to the citizens. So, which makes me wonder, tawaya unemployment. As much as a responsibility of the government to create employment, but do you think there could be other factors that we as the citizens are not aware of that's preventing the government from, creating more jobs for the citizens? Do you think that there could be other influences, either internationally or locally, that could be preventing us from reaching certain goals, in terms of the government from reaching certain goals in terms of employment?
I think that would be speculation. This is me speculating. I don't know. But I think, because of the type of system that we have in South Africa, because we do have I believe it's a mixed economy. Where it's not a fully like socialist economy where it's the government's responsibility to create jobs and everything else, because the private sector is big in South Africa. There's big private sector involvement as well. But like you said, I think so. I think also because of I'm not an economist, but like I said, it's all me speculating. I think maybe the number of graduates as well, in the country, could be affecting that. In the private sector, I'm going to go out and put my neck out there and say it's probably corruption as well, has a big role in that as well. But obviously there's other factors as well. So I think maybe the number of graduates as well, and the number of people that are still in government. There's so many people that are still working for the government that have been working that should be retired. So I think that's another thing. Like, there's so many people holding on to their jobs. They should be retiring.
So the reason why...
Sorry.
Okay.
Deposit.
So anyway, like I was saying, the reason why I'm asking you that question, I was looking at some stats the other day. Apparently, our government owns only 15% of the land in the whole of South Africa. Only 15%, like 1/5. And the other 85% belongs to the private sector. Let's just call it
that. That's what I was alluding to as well. That's why I said, because of our economy and the fact that we're not fully reliant on the government. We also rely on the private sector as well. And like you said, the private sector does have the biggest slice of the pie.
And like 15%, like in order to create jobs, you definitely need land.
Definitely.
Definitely need land. Like let's take farming, for example. In order for there to be a farm, you need land, lots of land, lots of space. And I don't think the government can afford to like start a program, let's say, farming, because they don't have the space, they don't have enough land to do that. So that could be one of the things that's hindering the process of creating jobs. So I don't know. So, and that's just like, I just stumbled upon that information just a couple of weeks ago. So, like, what other forces could there be that could be, hindering the government from creating more jobs? I think that's something that we need to explore and do some research on, because I think there's a lot of things happening internationally and even locally.
The influence.
A lot of influences that could be kind of hindering and just disturbing the whole process of job creation. And I mean, I know there's definitely corruption in the government. That much I know.
Even in the private sector. I mean, there's corruption everywhere. Like, we read the news all the time. We hear about it on the news all the time. So it's not to say that corruption is just a problem that's happening in the public sector. So we can, like you said, we can speculate as to what exactly the problem is. And even with the international influence that's coming in, that's definitely, I think, maybe another problem, because countries are very diplomatic with each other, and sometimes other countries influence, or if I bring this to your country, then I bring people from my country. If I'm bringing this project to your country, then I have to bring people from my country as well to carry it out. So they work on that particular project instead of finding the skills within our country, whereas it's an international project or something like that. So I think.
So back to the issue of land, the government owning only 15% of it. Do you think, apparently it's been like that since 1994?
So it hasn't really much, hasn't
I think
changed.
When Nelson Mandela came out of prison and there were some documents that he had to sign for the whole transition, for us to be included in the government and to participate in the whole democracy thing. He had to sign that, okay, it's fine, the government will only just own 15% of the land and the other 85 will already had. So, as I was saying, already, that's the issue of land, ne? Are you with me? Okay. So, like, as I was saying, since 1994, ne?
Hey.
There's been this law that was signed by Nelson Mandela when he came out of prison. And he had to sign that the government will only have ownership to 15% of the land, the whole land, South Africa. The government will only have 15%. And 85% was already designated to certain individuals. And he had to sign that for the transition apartheid into this new era right now.
I think the fact that there were compromises that had to be made on both sides on the democracy and independence, because it's certainly happened in every country. I read this book. I haven't finished it, but I read this book. It's about the life of former president, Zimbabwe, Mugabe.
All right.
It's a very interesting book because it talks about his life from fighting for independence of Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And one thing I learned is that freedom did not come cheap in Africa. Independence did not come cheap. So there was certain it was a negotiation. For the independence of Zimbabwe. Certain compromises had to be made because the people that were in power and Makhoa and them, obviously they had an interest, that was rooted for years in that country. So it's not something that they were willing to compromise on so easily. So I think that's what happened. Independence, that it didn't come as freely as we think it did.
So it wasn't just a matter of, okay, we're at that point where we want independence, we want to be free, and then just give us that freedom. Nah.
It didn't work like that. Let go of it so easily.
And obviously, if someone is in a position of power and you want to take that power away from them, obviously, okay, they're in a position of power and you want freedom. They might give you that freedom, but
at a price.
They also still want to maintain the standard of living. They want to make sure they're still
sorted.
Once
that independence, once that change comes, then they still also want to have a level of, because I think if I'm not mistaken, one of the other compromises that had to be made was that the people that were handing out the judgments at that time were not persecuted. Some of them were not persecuted.
Are you referring to Zimbabwe?
No. South Africa now.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, Zimbabwe was just an example to
say. No, back to this one. The people that were handing out persecutions, they had to be left alone.
Yeah, I think that was
Yeah.
one of the
So
compromises that had to be made, or even some of the police that were
mm,
brutally handling no one. So I think that those were
even
some
the
of
guys that were like killing people without mercy, just shooting people up,
yeah.
they had to be left alone. And
Yeah,
and all
I
that.
think there was a compromise there, or maybe some of them could be persecuted. I don't want to go too far into that
Yeah.
because I might be wrong, but I think, from what into it. But I'm going to go back again to that Zimbabwe thing. Yeah, or, when the elections were coming up in Zimbabwe, the first elections, I think they were in the 80s. One of the things that was also debated was the change of the name. The changing of the name from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. That was also like a big debate.
Yeah.
And the issue of the land again was one big issue, and we all know what happened with the land in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't got into that part in the book, but I wanted to basically understand what was land reform looking like for Zimbabwe. And one of the things that they had to do was they had to travel to. So they had to go because Zimbabwe was colonized by Britain.
Okay.
So they had to go to Britain.
Yeah.
To negotiate for independence.
Yeah.
Because they were under their colonial rule.
Yeah.
So the British people, there was a whole debate. The Prime Minister at the time, Liena, he wouldn't let go of certain things, and people were not compromising.
Yeah.
So I was just making the comparison between the two because there's so many similarities.
Yeah.
In that we are an African country, they're an African country. The issue of land as well. Like I said, I'm gonna have to read the rest of the book to understand what actually happened with land reform. But the issue of land coming back to South Africa, those people that had been ruling the country owned everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not sympathizing, but I'm trying to understand, trying to put an argument forward. Those people were ruled for such a long time, and they had interest in the land. They had so much interest vested in it.
Yeah.
It's like we talked about the grant, or it's like taking bread from somebody else's mouth. A lot of them own farms, and those farms are to them a means of putting bread to their families. And so they have a huge vested interest in the land.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's when they had to make those compromises. No, we can't just give up everything. We're going to give you independence, but we can't give up on the land. This is what we want in return for your independence.
Yeah. As much as
ironic as it is.
Yeah. As much as we've received that independence, it's not really favoring us. I think we're sort of like strong armed into this current situation that we're in right now.
True.
It was more of a situation of you can take it or leave it. Because even during the negotiations with Nelson Mandela, there were some other. Remember that Chris Hani, one of the leaders, he was at the forefront. Remember that it was around the time that he got assassinated. And I think the odds were not really in our favor during that process of the negotiations. So that's one of the things that really set us back, and that's why it's so difficult to prosper right now in South Africa. But it's funny because right now the name of our country, South Africa, the full name is the Republic of South Africa. And if you check the word republic in the dictionary, it means a country that does not have any monarchy, meaning there are no kings or queens. It's not ruled by a queen or king. So that's what South Africa is to the international community. But at the same time, if you look at the current, like at the same time, here in South Africa right now, how many kings do we have in our country right now?
But how much power do they have?
Like, just how many kings are there right now?
I'm thinking probably a lot.
A lot. So it does not make sense to name the country a republic, whereas there are kings in the country, because it's the definition of republic is a country that is not ruled by a king or a queen, but at the same time,
that would mean that it's then a kingdom.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, we have kings and queens. So that's one of the things that I think we're kind of blindsided at the same time. Like, I think democracy, I mean, on paper, it's a good idea. Yeah, I do agree.
Is it?
On paper. Yeah, but in actuality and given our history, it's not really the ideal situation for us. I don't believe.
As an African country, or just as a general?
As an African country with our history.
Okay.
It's not, I don't think it's ideal because remember that when we were colonized all those years back, this country was ruled by kings and queens. And after colonization, then came apartheid. And then after that, it's now here where we are right now, freedom, democracy. So I think instead of just diving into this democracy thing, shouldn't we have gone back to, the situation before colonization? I think that would have been the proper step to take, to go back there to the time our country was led by kings and queens, and then take it from there. Because remember, those people got their land stripped away from them.
Yeah.
So how can you say we're now free, but at the same time you did not give those monarch families, you did not give them their lands back and their power back. So I don't think you can really say that we're free if you did not make those rectifications. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you understand?
I hear you. Yeah. I love that because that shows how layered this thing of democracy is and politics and the history of our country. Because there's so many things that you've said that make sense. And I'm thinking, how would that look like? Had we just said in 1994 or before that, while we were still negotiating for this freedom.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, these people that were in power, they have a lot of influence, they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
They have there are so many steps ahead of us. There's so many steps ahead of us. And I think it's not working. It's not a very. It's not. I'm not judging them.
Yeah.
It's not far-fetched to say, or they have looked at every single angle. Gore should now the country move forward into this, because mind you, they wanted to benefit. Now they're considering this as their country because they've been here for generations. And don't you think maybe, given the fact that if we had said we want our independence and we want to rule our country as a kingdom of South Africa, and we want to rule our country the way our ancestors ruled before the white man came to our lands, what would that look like? what would we have then had to give up for that to happen?
Yeah.
How would that look? How would we go back to that as a people? How much time would it take for us to go back there? Do we even know? Because I think, there's so many centuries of African history that has been wiped off because of the project of colonization.
Yeah.
Because in order to rule, they had to erase everything, our culture, our practices, everything. These people came with a plan. They said, we are bringing with us a new religion. We are bringing with us new systems. We are bringing with us education. We are bringing a new economy, a new financial system. And it's not like they came to Africa and we didn't have a financial system. We didn't have an education system. It looked different, but how would the modern mind go back there as a modern African person who has been colonized for centuries? Mind you, even the people that were here when those people arrived, a lot of them are gone. And with a lot of them,
I think all of them are gone.
Is gone.
All of them are gone. Yeah.
So, how is it going to look like? Because they had to erase everything in order to build this new South Africa up.
Yeah.
Or that was back and when people fought back, we all know what happened.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking of so many possibilities in my head. In an ideal situation, yes, it would have been nice to go back to our roots. But do we know what our roots look like? And what would it take for us to go back there?
I mean, obviously.
And the people that took us from there, would they really have accepted it?
Yeah. Like, obviously, it would be impossible to live life the way we used to live before colonization. That would not be possible. For example, the clothes that we're wearing compared to the clothes that our ancestors used to wear.
Yeah.
They used to wear like animal skins. So if
some might even argue that these are Western clothes.
They are Western clothes.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. If somebody comes through right now and he's wearing animal skin, we're gonna look at him like, yo.
Yeah, in a modern mind, how?
Yeah. So I believe there are certain things that they came with that that were different, and we had to adjust. And like clothes, for example, and technology and many other things. So whether it's a good thing or bad thing, I don't know, but we are where we are right now. Obviously, we can't go back to wearing animal skins.
Yeah.
And then in terms of language also, obviously English is an international language, and it's the language that we use because we speak different African languages.
Yeah.
So I might know 2 or 3 African languages, but there are other African languages that I don't know. So English is like the common tongue that we use to communicate. So that's also okay. I can whether it's a good thing or bad thing, I don't know. It's a foreign language, but it's a language that we use to communicate.
Okay.
But there are things that we can definitely get back to, like the monarch families, for example. We still have those. Those, they haven't managed to wipe that away. They haven't managed to erase that. It's still there. There are many monarch families that still exist today, even though they don't have the power that they once had, but they still exist, and we still know them. So there is a way of tracing that bloodline. So I think if we could go back to that, it would be a different scenario, because I feel like democracy was something that was just imposed on us. I don't think we really chose to run the government that way. It was something that was part of the bargain. That if you're gonna have freedom, this is how you're going to run the country through this system. And so it's not necessarily working for us right now.
Okay, but now my question to you is, because now I want us to, how would you want it to look? Let's say now you were at that table. How would you want South Africa, the independent South Africa, to look? What would you want it to look like?
Obviously, the number one thing is people don't want to live in poverty. I think that's the number one thing, that it's probably a crime. It should be a crime to humanity that somebody should, like, especially a country like South Africa with our natural resources and all the minerals that we have, and like we're probably one of the wealthiest countries, wealthiest country in the world in terms of just our natural resources alone. So it's not fair that most of us are not living, we're living in poverty, It does not make sense. Like, for example, look at places like the UAE, look at places like Qatar, they have their own natural resources and the whole country is prosperous and life is good, So why can't it be the same in our country? So that's why I'm asking the question, like, and don't you think there are other international influences or even local influences that prevents the government from achieving certain goals,
Yeah, definitely.
So apart from, financial security, obviously you can't dictate something like religion. That's something that is unique to each of us.
Country.
Not necessarily each country, but each individual. Like, like especially a place as diverse as South Africa. Like, we might, in my household, we might be Christians.
Yeah.
But then next door, they might be believing to the African tradition. The following house, they might be Muslims. So you can't. I don't think you can dictate something like religion. And so, if to answer your question, I think the first thing that we'll have to pay considerable attention to is definitely the way that our country is run. Yeah. Our country is governed. I think the traditional way of running things, the monarch system, I think that's the best way. Because if you, like, let's take France, for example. They had the French Revolution, and that was the people saying that, we're fed up with the monarch, and now we wanna run the country our own way. Okay, that's fine for them. That's fine because they took that decision on their own without any influences from anybody. But that thing was imposed on us. We did not decide that we don't want the monarch to run things. It was decided on us,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, how can we really say that we're free if we can't even go back to the way things were run before democracy?
Yeah. So I think it would take a lot. Fundamentally, as people, we'd have to agree on one thing.
Yeah.
As Africans. And so far, I don't think there's one thing that Africa can agree on, because, like you mentioned, that's a very good example.
Yeah.
With the Middle Eastern countries, or Qatar and them. So they have one thing that binds them. One could say it's that religion. It binds them, and they have a certain way of living, and they're not compromising on it. To say, even if you are somebody coming from outside and you come into our country, this is how we live and you have to accept it.
Yeah.
This is how women have to dress. This is how we run things in our country. You know, because I know, for example, they're in Saudi Arabia, their weekends are not the same as ours. Their weekends are Friday and Saturday.
They have a different calendar.
Yes, as well.
Yeah.
So their week starts on a Sunday.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And
actually, while you're on that, even us as Africans, we have a different calendar.
Exactly.
But not really.
Yeah. I think Ethiopia is still sticking to that. Yeah. Because they also have their own calendar, and apparently they're still in their own year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because actually, in our African belief, I don't know if you can call it belief or whatever, but the year starts in September actually. But the only calendar that we have that's official, it's the Western calendar. Yeah,
the one that's pretty much really follows. So, like I said, I think for that to work, we'd have to, like I said, agree on one thing as Africans.
Yeah.
To say we agree on this one thing. You know, that's why religion matters, because those people would not have taken away our religion if it did not matter. Look at the things that matter that they took away from us.
Yeah.
And they did not just take them away from us like that. They had a reason for that. They had to be a reason for that. And I may sound like a conspiracy theorist, but if religion wasn't such an important thing to do when you're colonizing a country, they wouldn't have taken away.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I think to get to that point where the Middle Eastern countries are, we'd have to, whether we like it or not, sort of also come together and say, we are going religion. Back to our African, you know, like you said, the calendar. Such things, you can think, it's not a very important thing. Even with the name, like I said, Zimbabwe. To get to Zimbabwe from Rhodesia, they had to negotiate that. They wanted a name that represented them as an African country.
Yeah.
So for us to change the name South Africa, you know, to make it a more African sounding name or whatever, to decide as a country, this is what we're going to call our country. But it's so difficult because we have 11 official languages. Who is going to agree to say, let's give it a Zulu name when there's so many other people, or a Sotho name? You know, everybody's going to be like, no, we wanted to be, you know, Africa Zonga, or we wanted to be South Africa, and that debate. And then we get to religion, and then everybody's
that's
like,
the thing right there. Like
it's so difficult
about the name, or we'll be in an argument, in a debate, or why give it a Zulu name, why give it a Pedi name. It's a mindset kind of thing, if you think about it. Because remember, in that during the apartheid period, we were segregated. Zulus aside, Pedis aside, Vendas
was
aside,
part of the project as well,
Xhosas aside,
to make it work.
Yeah, so it's like we still have, there's still kind of that mindset that, oh, they are Zulus, so they are these kind of people, and we have our typical
things about
them. I just like we kind of we don't like we don't see ourselves as one people. We see ourselves as different nations, you know, like in one country. Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that's
so really... there has to be a vision to say, we need a leader that has a vision to say, this is what I want South Africa to look like. And we need buy-in from South Africans, you know.
Like, can you imagine what South Africa would look like if, you know, we were never segregated, Pedis aside, Zulus aside, like if we were just left alone to just mix and mingle with each other. Can you imagine like what kind of people we would be today?
I think we would have definitely fought, because we can't say that a war was not imminent.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
definitely there would have been wars. There would have been other tribes that would have wanted to take over and say we want, so we can't necessarily say it wouldn't have been much more different, but it would have been different in a sense. We'd still have our African roots, we'd still be African people.
Definitely. Because like war is a natural part of life.
Yeah, there's conflict everywhere.
Name one country that hasn't been in a war.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think whichever king or queen that would have conquered, probably we would have going to end up using their language and adopting their language, and would all probably be speaking one language, an African language.
But we'd still be African.
Yeah, but we'd still be Africans.
Not that we're not Africans, but we would still have those African.
We wouldn't be diluted. Because I feel like we're diluted right now.
We are very disconnected. I'm not going to lie, we are very, very disconnected. I think at some point or some level we would have been connected.
Yeah.
We would have still had a way of doing things that we wanted to do our way. We wouldn't have had a leader come from, or people coming from, people that look different from us. Maybe we would have had people that speak different from us, but then if we wouldn't, that transition to the new African leader under this regime where we are all African people and we are all doing African things and African and whatever. So it wouldn't have been that different than to have another person who completely looks different from us, who completely speaks different from us, coming in with a new complete system that erases our systems.
Definitely.
Completely wipes them out. And I think we would have maybe made it to a point where we would have been like, this is what we want, but now we don't know. That's the problem. We don't know. So we don't have a vision that says, this is what we want South Africa. And I think maybe that's the problem.
Yeah.
That after independence, we were so diluted that, we had to make compromises and all those things. And now you can even see with this new era that we are living in, people are becoming more and more connected to their roots. There are people that are learning about their roots. There are people who are accepting callings to be sangomas and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think in a way it's showing some kind of shift. It's showing that there was some kind of disconnect. Now that's the way I'm taking it from our roots and from who we were. And I think, it's very sad to see South Africa and Africa from this modern day, to show that the people that are suffering the most are children of Africa that belong to the soil.
Because if you even look at our natural resources, not just in South Africa, but the whole African continent, like we're the richest continent on the planet Earth, but at the same time we're the poorest. So this tells me that, even if your country is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, as much wealth as we have, there's no way you can take all that wealth for yourself.
No way.
So there are definitely international forces that are at play, and the media is not really, I don't think the media is exploring much into all of that.
They won't, because we all know who the media is.
Yeah.
Who runs the media.
Yeah. They won't.
They're not going to do that.
Definitely.
And it's not in the best interest of Project Independent Republic of South Africa. It's not in the best interest of the people of South Africa, because if they were to do full-on reporting, I think it would make us angry as a people.
Yeah.
And these are truths that we know, but there's nothing we can do about it. Because what are you? You're a poor man on the ground. The only thing you are worried about is feeding your family. And if you're so worried about feeding your family, you don't care about what happens to the country's natural resources.
Definitely. And I think another thing that's flawed about democracy is, like, look, you're elected into office, right? For 5 years, let's say. And you can mess up however, in whichever way you like. After 5 years, it's over. Then you're done. You're sitting by yourself with your family over there, and you're just a normal citizen again.
And we're going to have to wait 5 years.
And there's no accountability. I feel like there's no accountability in that. Whereas if you come from a royal family and you know that as
King Mama,
as king whoever or queen whoever, it's my responsibility for. I think there's a certain level of compassion because you look at the people as your own children. Like, I can't let my people suffer like this. I feel like it's a Western concept and not necessarily for us. I don't think it's working for us.
That's true.
Like, there's no accountability. Like, if it's a monarch, and I know or my family is responsible for making sure that all the people are, well taken care of. Personally, I'm going to feel like it's my responsibility that these people should have a good life, and it has a compassion element to it. But when it comes to democracy, it's like I'm just in office and I don't know these people. And I'm just looking out for myself. And then when I'm done, after that 5 years, I can retire or whatever. But then if it's a monarch, it's a lifetime thing. And you're probably groomed to do it from the time you're still young up until the time you're in that position to be a leader. So I don't know, that's just how I feel about it.
So don't you think, or maybe another thing Kadi Monarch is that, like you said, or maybe another advantage go or in power. We don't have to wait for 5 years. Or if we don't want, is it possible? Or family so but
it is possible. It is possible. Because remember, the monarchs, it's group of families. Then if the citizens are not happy about whatever, they'll just say, all right, this family is not really, doing justice by us. So like you do have that option to say, no, we don't want this family. Let's go to the next family. And you don't have to wait for 5 years.
For 5 years. I think that's
But I think it just depends on the way those monarch families are running the country. Because obviously there are going to be some laws in place to say you can do this, you can't do that. So why one other thing? So I feel like if it's a monarch family, I feel that the people feel more, the leaders feel more attached to the citizens, and they feel a deeper compassion and sense of justice and doing good, and no family wants to bring disgrace on their own family. Like if you're a leader of a nation and you're representing your whole family, I feel like you have this sense of I don't want to bring disgrace on my family. So I believe that's the best way forward. That's just what I believe in.
That makes sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. So we've chopped it up. This topic.
We have chopped it up, but one more thing, remember we as Africans, like we're not people like Western people. Like we're different from white people, for example. In a sense, there are many things in our lives that we go through or we face that other people don't have to face. And okay, let's take for example a nation like Qatar in the Middle East. There are certain laws in those countries that govern the people. Like for example, if you're caught doing certain things, there are punishments for that. For example, there are certain laws that govern witchcraft. Like if you're caught doing something related to witchcraft or black magic or whatever, there are laws that can actually they can implement and they can bring you into justice for doing that. So those laws are part of the law of the country. Whereas in South Africa, there's no such law. But at the same time, we are people that we know that this thing is there, it's out there, it exists, but there's no such law in the government. Like for example, if I go to the police station right now and say, Smamang, one lawyer, they're probably gonna laugh at me. They're gonna ask for proof on how do you know, like all kinds of questions. And then even if you answer all those questions, they're gonna be like, Sonya Gargaridri. Like there's no such law. There are certain laws in our government that do not represent the African person from A to Z. Maybe they represent us from halfway. But there are many things in the African tradition that the law does not cover. Why one?
Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting that you should mention that, because there was such a law actually in South Africa.
Okay.
I think it was during apartheid.
Okay.
But I think it was mainly a law or it prevented people from practicing African religion.
Okay.
So it came from a point of African spirit. It was rooted in the fact that African spirituality is something that should not be practiced. So it was Christianity, even the mainstream religion, they had to outlaw African practices, African spirituality practices.
Okay.
So I think there was some kind of witchcraft law that was put into place to say, if you are caught at any point or any level or practice any African spirituality practices, then you are going to be arrested under this so-called law. So I think it was there, Mara, it was intended for the purpose, Christianity, Ibe, or whatever religion, Ibe, the mainstream religion.
So with this new government, they scrapped it.
Pardon?
With this new government after 1994, they scrapped that law.
Yeah, I think I saw one. I don't think it still exists.
Okay. So anyway, those are the fruits of democracy for you.
Yeah. This topic, we can talk for days about it. Yeah. And I think that maybe we should revisit some other time.
Definitely.
Because there's so much that we can say about it. And there's so many things that we see as South Africans and we are experiencing as South Africans because of the inequalities of the past. And the legacy. So.
And like the progress is so slow.
It's very slow.
And some would say there's no progress at all. So we should definitely revisit this topic, talk about it some more, and see and look at options and just go with it and see where it takes us,
Okay. So I think
this was fun.
This was fun. This was a very, very serious conversation.
It was a bit intense.
It was very intense. It forced us to think a lot. But like I said, I think we should revisit it again. And I'm looking forward to the next episode. Thank you for joining us for this episode.
Thanks to all our viewers. We still encourage everybody to subscribe,
please,
and like and comment. That will be very much appreciated. So
what is the name of our YouTube channel?
It's BAP Youth Group.
BAP Youth Group.
Yeah.
And then we also have a podcast on the audio platforms.
Yeah.
Do listen to that on the Pillow Youth podcast. Thank you so much again for joining us. It's been such a lovely episode.
Yeah.
It's been very intense.
Until next time.
It was almost a history lesson.
Almost, yeah.
But thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.